But to the Jews, they still had a problem with that because the Idumeans didn't try to keep their bloodlines as clear as the Jews. They were more like the Samaritans in the eyes of the Jews. So that caused problems for Herod. So he actually converted to Judaism, though it was something more to help his career rather than a sign of faithfulness. Now his father was a man named Antipater. And Antipater was procurator of Judea under the Romans. And while he was procurator, he made Herod the governor of Galilee. But while Herod was governor there, they were attacked by the Parthians, which were an ancient Iranian people. And the Parthians put a man named Antigonus, who was a Hasmonean, on the throne. Now, a Hasmonean is actually a Jewish priestly family. So that was kind of their family name. So here was a true Jew on the throne. But Herod ran from Judea and went to Rome. And in Rome, he got in good with a man named Mark Antony and another man named Octavian, who we know better as Caesar Augustus. And he convinced them that he would be loyal. Now it was Julius Caesar who took the army and did all the conquering. He's the one that found the Roman territory. But Caesar Augustus is considered to be the founder of the Roman Empire. And so the Roman Senate actually gave Herod the title of King of the Jews. And then they gave him an army, and so he went back to Judea with the Roman army. It took him 7 years to conquer Jerusalem. And to solidify his claim of the throne, he actually married a Hasmonean princess by the name of Mariamne. But the only real thing he remained faithful to was to Rome, because they could take his power away. Because you see, Herod was not a good man. He was a very evil man. His reign was pretty rough. There are 71 members of the Jewish Sanhedrin, which is the leading religious figures. He had 45 of those members killed because they had supported Antigonus when he was king. He couldn't handle any threat to his authority. Matter of fact, he went after Antigonus's whole family and killed all his relatives, so there'd be no rivalry for his throne. He was very jealous of that throne. He killed his favorite wife and 3 of his sons because he thought they were trying to usurp him and replace him. Caesar Augustus himself once said of Herod, "It would be better to be Herod's pig than his son." So even the ruler of the greatest country in the world at the time is saying, hey, you wouldn't want to be this guy's son. He's not a good man. But he got so crazy about it that when his life was coming to an end, he had a bunch of prominent Jewish members arrested. And the instructions were, when I die, I want all of them killed. Because he was afraid no one was going to mourn his death. And so he thought, well, if we kill all these other people, then it'll be a day of mourning, and that would be his way of getting some recognition from him. So he was a very egotistical man and very much worried about somebody trying to take his throne away from him. So we have to keep that in mind when the Magi come to him and say what they say. The Magi, excuse me. So the Magi, now, Magi comes from the Greek word magos, which actually means magician or magic. But they were actually a priestly sect that had been around in ancient Persia for a long time. They were focused on astrology, but dabbled in prophecy and magic and demonology. Anything related to religion they looked at. In their communities, they were considered to be their religious leaders. But in Daniel chapter 2, verse 48, it said that the king promoted Daniel and gave him many great gifts, and he made him ruler over the entire province of Babylon and chief prefect over all the wise men of Babylon. So this group had been around since the time of David, And at one point, David had even been in charge of them. This helps explain a little bit while they were looking at the prophecies of what we now call the Old Testament. These men were actually paying attention. It's estimated that it was over 900 miles from where they started to where they were going to end to search for this Messiah. Now, there's a few myths that you are probably familiar with. Oftentimes, if you see a nativity, you've got the shepherds and you've got the wise men all standing around the manger. When the wise men actually find Jesus, he's believed to be somewhere between 6 months and 2 years old. This also explains why after Herod didn't get to talk to the wise men, that he had all the kids 2 years and under killed in the area around Bethlehem. He wasn't taking any chances that there would be somebody that might take over his throne. So they weren't quite there at the birth, but sometime within his first 2 years. Plus, we don't know if there were 3 of them. We just know that together they brought 3 gifts. We've always assumed 3 because of the gifts, but we're not sure. It never actually says there were 3 men. And so let's actually look at some of the prophecies that these men were looking at that led them to search for the Messiah. The wise men go to Herod because they assume that a new king is going to be born to the old king. So they go to Herod thinking, well, this is the guy we need to ask about this. That's what was their assumption. If you want to find the king, you go to the current king. But Ezekiel, before we go into that, let's go ahead and read this before I get too far ahead of myself. So we'll read the first 12 verses in Matthew chapter 2. Now, after Jesus was born in Bethlehem of Judea, in the days of Herod the king, behold, Magi from the east arrived in Jerusalem, saying, where is he who has been born King of the Jews? For we saw his star in the east and have come to worship him. When Herod the king heard this, he was troubled, and all Jerusalem with him. So now Herod's worried about somebody usurping his throne. That makes the rest of Jerusalem nervous, because when Herod gets nervous, people tend to die. And gathering together all of the chief priests and scribes of the people, and the Sadducees were actually in power at the time, he inquired of them where the Messiah was to be born. They said to him, in Bethlehem of Judea, for this is what has been written by the prophet. And this is taken from Micah chapter 5, verse 2. And you, Bethlehem, land of Judah, are by no means least among the leaders of Judah. For from you will come forth a ruler who will shepherd my people. Then Herod secretly called for the Magi and determined from them the exact time that the star appeared. And he sent them to Bethlehem and said, go and search carefully for the child. And when you have found him, report to me, so that I too may come and worship him. After hearing the king, they went on their way, and behold, the star, which they had seen in the east, went on ahead of them until it came to a stop over the place where the child was to be found. When they saw the star, they rejoiced exceedingly with great joy. And after they came into the house, they saw the child with his mother Mary, and they fell down and worshipped him. Then they opened their treasures and presented to him gifts of gold, frankincense, and myrrh. And after being warned by God in a dream not to return to Herod, the Magi left for their own country by another way. So there's the first part of the story. There's a little more that goes into it at the end that we won't have time for this morning. But the Magi come looking, they go to Herod, because you would go to the palace to find the king. And why did they have that idea that Jesus would be born a king? Well, in prophecies you have, like Ezekiel 34:23, then I will appoint over them one shepherd my servant David, and he will feed them himself and be their shepherd. So this is one of the passages talking about, whenever they say David, they're talking about a king. Jeremiah 23:5, behold, the days are coming, declares the Lord, when I will raise up for David a righteous branch, and he will reign as king and act wisely and do justice and righteousness in the land. So this is why they're looking for a king. This is what they're seeing in prophecy. So what does the star have to do with that? Well, in Numbers 24:17, it says, I see him, but not now. I look at him, but not near. A star shall appear from Jacob. A scepter shall rise from Israel. So I see him, but not at this time. I look at him, but he's not near. This is something that far off that's going to happen. And this is one of others that talks about a star. But whether this star was a real star, and there is some astrology history that shows some things we won't get into this morning, and things I really don't completely understand, to be honest, or whether this was a miracle that God had done, I really think it was probably both. I think God could use what was there, and I think God could use any other miraculous means that he wanted to make this star. But it's interesting that in that passage, they're following the star to Jerusalem, but then suddenly the star leads them after that specifically. It takes them to the place where Jesus is. So there's something miraculous going on there. Now, Jesus was born at a time of darkness in the land. And here's what I love about the whole star analogy. He was the light that was coming into the land. If you read through the book of John, John consistently refers to Jesus as light. He's the one that said, in the beginning was the Word was with God. He goes on to explain how the light was with God, and when you look at Genesis and the creation, what's the first thing he does? God said, let there be light. So now we have a light that is shining in a time of darkness. And so this is heralding, there's a light heralding a light to come. A light that is still shining to this day, and one that would be a salvation to all of mankind. But there's prophecies that also say, well, he's going to be born of a virgin. And so you get to Isaiah 7 verse 4. Therefore the Lord himself will give you a sign. Behold, the virgin will conceive and give birth to a son, and she will name him Emmanuel. It even talks about the wise men who are sometimes called kings, as they're saying, we three kings of Orient are. In Psalm 72:10, may the kings of Tarshish and of the islands bring gifts. May the kings of Sheba and Seba offer tributes. There are over 300 prophecies that were heralding Jesus' entrance into the world as the Messiah. Over 300. The odds of Jesus fulfilling 8 of those prophecies is 1 in a 1 with 17 zeros. Now, I don't know what illion we're talking about. This is beyond my ability to know the number. But that's only for 8 prophecies. A 1 in 1 with 17 zeros chance of him fulfilling 8. But he fulfilled over 300. They have yet to find a prophecy he didn't fulfill. And so what do these wise men actually teach us? We see very clearly what it is that Herod teaches us. We could focus on being great in this world. We could focus on forgetting about what anybody else thinks and making sure I'm the one who's comfortable. Is that not familiar of what society is today? You only live once. You're only young once. You got to get out and see what life's about. Well, that's quite a bit different from what we're taught by the Magi there. The Magi were looking. The people that should have been looking were not. when Herod goes to the priest, they tell him immediately, oh, the Messiah's going to be born in Bethlehem. We know that. They weren't going to look for him. They weren't going to search for him. They had stopped looking. They were also faithful. The Bible teaches us that God will meet the needs of anyone who searches for him faithfully. That's what the wise men were doing. They went looking. They went to find him. They went to be faithful in that trip. They refused to quit. They traveled over 900 miles. There's no telling what happened in that time period. There was no cars, no planes, no trains. It was camels. From the nativity, it's camels, or horses, or donkeys. That's how they did most of the big travel. They had no guarantee that when they got there, they would find him. But they still didn't quit. And when they got there, they worshiped. They found the king, they worshiped the king. How familiar is that to us today? Are we not still looking? Are we not to be faithful? Are we not to refuse to quit even when life gets hard? Even when temptations grow? Are we not called to worship him not just on Sunday, but every second of every minute of every day that we're alive? Our lives are to be the worship. They're to be the gift that we give. And so when we look at the gifts that they gave, they are also reflective of the life of Jesus. Gold was a gift that you brought for a king. It represents Jesus' royalty. He was the rightful and prophesied king that was to come. And when gold is given, gold is a universal sign for wealth and power. He who has the gold makes the rules, so to speak. And so a traditional gift for a king is gold. But frankincense, this actually represents Jesus' role as a priest, because frankincense was a fragrant incense that was burned in the temple. And so this is expressing Jesus' divinity, his role as our high priest. They were recognizing that in the gifts that they were bringing. So the frankincense shows his divine nature and his role as the high priest. And then the myrrh is the one that's very questionable of why you would bring that to a child. Myrrh was a spice that was used to anoint bodies for burial. So in the three gifts that they bring, they represent his kingship. They represent him as the high priest. And they also foreshadow his eventual sacrifice and death for us. So as we look at the things that they did and what they brought to him, we see that there is much to learn. They appeared in a time of darkness, following a light. And they weren't just following a light that was in the sky, they were following a light that was to bless all of mankind, the light. They honored Jesus as Gentiles more than any of the Jews did. The Jews didn't seek him out. The wise men did. They understood the importance and significance of the prophecies that they had read, and they wanted to see the culmination of those prophecies, to see this king that's been promised. They witnessed it. They shared it. They brought gifts that honored the whole time of Jesus' stay on this earth. And so the question is, are you still seeking the light? Are you looking for it? Are you faithful in how you look? In where you look? In why you look? Are you faithful in all things? When things get tough, you refuse to quit. You refuse to give up always searching for the truth. As I always say, don't trust what I tell you. Go into the Bible and read it. If you find something different, come and talk to me about it. There is a possibility that I could be wrong. And I'm not saying a small possibility. There's always a big possibility. I may be wrong. If so, let's look at it together. You never have to fear. I will be more than happy to do that. After you refuse to quit, do you continue to worship? Because we bring gifts now, but the gift is us. It's everything that we are. We say, hey, we're going to make a covenant with you, and we want your Spirit to fill us and lead us and guide us. And how often do we see the Spirit at work in the world around us? If you can't see it, you're not looking, because it's there. Jesus just wants everything that we are, because when we give that to him, he gives us forever. And it doesn't just start after we die. Forever begins today. So if these are things that you have forgotten, that you've looked away from, if you feel like you've stopped looking, if you feel like you haven't been as faithful as you need to, if you've had to quit because it's gotten tough, if you've forgotten to represent him in life, these are all things that he is waiting to welcome you back from. So we have this time this morning that you can come forward, you can share anything that's bothering you. You can begin your journey today in baptism. Make that covenant, take that step. But we'll do that time now. May the Lord bless you and keep you. May the Lord make his face to shine upon you and be gracious to you. May the Lord lift his countenance upon you and give you peace. Let's stand and sing.